Last topic for today, we were going to talk about problem solving and intelligence, but I don't think we're going to get to it today, which is fine. So the last thing we need to talk about is just the different areas of the brain in humans that are, involved in language processing. And the two main ones are called Broca's area and Wernicke's area. And these basically control different aspects of language. Language isn't just like one thing that there's one part of our brain doing. It's this very complex process that requires lots of different areas of the brain. So essentially, Wernicke's area seems to be the spot that's mostly storing kind of like the meaning of words and comprehension of what those words mean. Whereas Broca's area seems to be more controlling like the fluency of language. So my ability to stand up here and like talk, put a sentence together and for it to come out fluently is controlled by Broca's area. So if you damage either of those areas, then you'll lose that corresponding ability. So if you have damage to Broca's area, you lose that like fluency. Someone with damage to Broca's area can still understand the words, they can still comprehend what they mean, and they can speak to some extent, but it'll be very like effortful. So let's just, I have a video. I think Broca's aphasia is the first one. And this one is actually an example of someone who had a stroke that affected Broca's area, and they've been in recovery from that stroke for like several years. This is kind of showing not the most extreme case of Broca's aphasia because they've recovered from it to some extent.
Can you tell us your name?
Mike Caputo.
And Mike, when was your stroke?
I was 7 years ago.
Okay.
And
what did you used to do?
Worked Autodesk, sales and worldwide, and very good, yeah.
Okay, and who are you looking at over there when you turn your head?
That's my wife.
Okay, and why is she helping you to talk?
She's a speech.
So you have trouble with your speech?
Yeah.
And what's that called?
Aphasia.
All right. And so why don't you work now?
I do.
And what do you do now?
Voices of Hope aphasia.
And what is Voices of Hope?
Peterburg, and Dr. Hinckley and myself, founder for me, and I members
All right, I'll pause it there because it goes on kind of like that for a while. So you can see he understands the questions that are being asked to him. He's responding, and the things he's saying are relevant. Some of it is so like specific. I don't know what Petersburg is, but it's something that's relevant to whatever organization he's talking about. So you can tell he understands and he's trying to respond, but it's hard for him to put together like a sentence that flows and that has all the appropriate grammatical parts. So that's Broca's aphasia because he had damage to Broca's area. Yeah, Cal?
You didn't have any trouble like writing, right?
I always get asked this question, and I always intend to look it up, and I always forget every time. I think it actually does impact their writing communication in a very similar way, is my memory. Okay, so that's Broca's aphasia. The next one is Wernicke's aphasia. So with this one, it's going to be basically kind of the opposite. So this person, they have a hard time comprehending the meaning of language and using the right words, but they still speak in a way that sounds fluent. It's sometimes referred to as word salad because it comes out and it's like they'll talk with the right like prosody and pacing, but the words that they're actually saying don't make any sense. And I think, again, this is someone that, had a stroke and is in recovery a couple years later. So they've made some progress, but they're still, definitely showing signs of this aphasia. It's also sometimes called fluent aphasia, but it's, more commonly known as Wernicke's aphasia.
Hi, Byron. How are you?
I'm happy. Are you pretty? You look good.
What are you doing today?
We stayed with the water over here at the moment and talked with the people for them over there. They're diving for them at the moment. They'll save in the moment. He'll have water very soon for him. With luck for him.
So we're on a cruise and we're about to
We
get to
will
June.
store it right here and they'll save their hands right there for them.
And what were we just doing with the iPad?
Right at the moment they don't show a darn thing.
With the iPad that we were doing. We, like here?
I'd like my change for me and change hands for me with Happy. I would talk with Donna sometimes. We're out with them. Other people are working with them. I'm very happy with them.
Good.
This girl was fairly good. And
All right, I'll pause it there. So again, you can see there's like that fluency. It kind of sounds like he's saying stuff, but it just doesn't make any sense at all. And he also seems to be kind of oblivious. Like she keeps asking him questions and he's like not even really responding to her. There's sort of that like turn-taking behavior to conversation, but he doesn't seem to really necessarily understand what she's asking. And so again, that's because he had damage to Wernicke's area, which kind of, regulates that understanding or comprehension of the actual words. There are other areas, involved in language, but those are the two that are kind of like really devoted to specifically language processing. I should also mention they're in the left hemisphere of the brain. The right hemisphere does to some extent also control like the rhythm a little bit, which is part of that fluency. But so like if you're singing a song, for example, there would be much more activity in the right side of the brain compared to if you're just speaking, and not singing. Okay, I think that's all I had for language. Any questions about any of that? Yeah, Alex.
This is actually really cool because this is the first time I've heard about these two sides of the brain, or these two areas of the brain.
Yeah.
And I've actually said for a while, sometimes my friends have observed and kind of gotten annoyed with me, so I'll pretentiously throw in a big vocabulary word.
Right.
And my excuse is that I'm actually really bad at coming up with using smaller words to form a greater meaning. And I compensate to that by using really, really specific words that I just happen to remember.
Right.
And, that was one thing. And then a few years ago, I was, my dad and I were out sitting at a fire pit in the backyard, and I said something silly, and he said, "Oh, that's funny." He said he does that same thing, but he thought he picked that up from his mother, who was learning English when she was a native Latin teacher.
Right.
And she was trying to experiment with all these words, and so she did that. And then he thought he picked that habit up from her, but then I, who was primarily raised by my mom separately, also have that habit.
That's interesting.
And it makes sense to me. If the part of I forgot which one was what, but the part that memorizes the words and the vocabulary for me is good, but the one that
it tries to put all that together, yeah.
Is kind of maybe not quite as developed as most people are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then that would make a lot of sense to me.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I've never heard of it described that way to like describe why someone would use like big words, but that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so that you would rely more on the vocabulary and memory rather than like piecing together a sentence that could maybe capture the same meaning as that word, but it takes more pieces. So yeah, and there definitely are like individual differences in these areas in terms of like how big they are, how active they are. So there definitely could be something underlying that like, yeah, your Wernicke's area, very well developed, Broca's area, maybe like not as much. Yeah. That's interesting. Thanks for sharing. Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions or comments about language? I think we'll stop there. We're about 30 minutes early, but that's not enough time to get through the other content I was going to cover. So I'll kind of make a decision. We might go over that stuff on Thursday. Depending on, I have another activity for you to do Thursday, so we'll play it by ear and see what happens.